I'm Jesse Lubinsky, host of the Partial Credit Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to My EdTech Live on this beautiful Thursday. Yes, it is a Thursday show. I know it's a little bit different. Usually we're on Wednesdays, but we are here on Thursday. We are live, and thank you so much for joining us today. As today we have a wonderful, wonderful guest who is here, and definitely I'm really excited to speak with my friend Micah Shippey, who is joining us here this evening, I should say. Micah, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I woke up this morning on Earth Day to 3 inches of snow up here in Syracuse, New York. So despite the weather, I'm doing great. Thanks.
Perfect. And thank you so much to all our audience members that you're joining us from everywhere. I see Gerardo's here. He's joining us from Campeche, Mexico. So thank you always to Gerardo for being a great supporter of the show. So Micah, yeah, so what's that all about? I mean, we're in April 22nd and you've got some snow. Wow.
That's Syracuse. It'll be 60 or 70 one day and we'll get snow the next day. But, it's home. We have 4 distinct seasons, and they remind us of that every fourth quarter. So we're feeling it.
There you go. Yeah, it's like not here in Texas. Texas, it's just pretty much kind of like maybe I think it's just 2 seasons, and for the most part, it's just really hot for the most part. But it's been a nice, cool day today. So I definitely enjoyed the day today. But again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited that you are here. It's been a long time follower of your work and everything that you do. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I really, talk you up a lot as far as being just a great help and great supporter and a great mentor during the Google Innovator Project, so that also as well. So really excited to have you here, share about the amazing things, the work that you're doing. Of course, with Ready Learner One, we're going to learn a little bit more about ChangeMaker also that I'm really excited about. And of course, you're an author. Pretty much you wear many hats, Micah. So I'm really excited for our audience members to know and our listeners, to just hear and get to know you a little bit more, Micah. So let's start off just by letting us know a little bit about your background, your current context and education.
Yeah, sure. Again, thanks, Fonz, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I tell you, we work in a pay it forward profession, and my whole career, pre-social media, because I'm old, it was pay it forward with all the people in my local area, my professional local community, as opposed to my network, which is so much broader now. So I love paying it forward, and I know it's cyclical, and we're all going to help each other do a better job at all that we do in this beloved field of ours. I'm 2 decades in, 21 years teaching middle school social studies. Coached soccer and basketball at that level for many years. I earned my PhD several years ago from Syracuse University, focusing on instructional design, development, and evaluation, really honing my skills in the area of bridging the gap between learner and content using emergent technologies. It's been amazing. The Google Innovator Academy was a catalyst for further growth beyond that, that has led to more and more opportunities. It's been great.
Oh man, that is so wonderful to hear. So again, just hearing a little bit about what you've done 20 years in. I mean, I'm sure in those 20 years you've seen some great changes from where you first started to what you are seeing now. So I mean, how has that, from going from what you first knew to what you know now, what are some of the things there that have motivated you to really just talk about, as we lead into talking about Ready Learner One and what you're doing, that sense of innovation, that learning, that, just continuing to grow. How did you first become passionate about, this field in education?
Well, I mean, storytelling is an old Chippy family trait. So I always loved storytelling, and being a history teacher, that was that synced with how I was wired. Being very qualitative. My PhD is qualitative, not quantitative. It's about story. It's about the human experience. What I learned, however, quickly as a teacher is that it's not all about me. It turns out. So my focus as I matured as an educator is on my learners, and watching their light bulb moments I found to be inspiring. And so I really wanted to drill down into what was it exactly that they were getting excited about. Frankly, sometimes it's the stories, but it's not every time. It seems that tools were a catalyst for their enthusiasm. And so a lot of my work in ed tech just kind of accelerated as a result of seeing learners grasp contents and increase motivation as a result of using those tools.
Nice. Well, I really like that aspect that you say, the storytelling, that storytelling aspect is definitely very important. And then when you bring that in with a mix of tools that can help you amplify that story even more, and then engage students to create their own stories or share their own stories, I think that's something that's great. As oftentimes we hear, and of course, through Twitter and a lot of educators, a lot of proponents of allowing students to amplify their voice. And I think that is something that is great, that is definitely critical. And it's a great learning experience, not only for yourself, like you said, that I think, because my next question was, what do you wish you had known when you first started out? But I think you kind of hit it in a sense when you said it's not all about me, as a teacher is what I'm doing, but it's about the students and even learning from them as well. So I think that that's something that is wonderful. So yeah, kudos to that. Now, what are some ways, just to talk a little bit just about your classroom experience and leading up into that, into what we're going to be talking about, what were some of your favorite activities? If you can share maybe a special moment, or maybe even this, what do you wish you knew when you first started out?
Well, we're trained as teachers in still very classical industrial revolution pedagogy. Very, very much the factory manager, the teacher, keeps the factory workers, the students, in lines, in rows, and dismisses by a bell, at least many of our schools. And so understanding that those pedagogical traits can be something to build off of, they're not the end-all be-all. The guide on the side is very powerful because it perpetuates a relationship-first approach to teaching. And I think that's very relevant for us, not only as educators with our students, but also with each other as educators trying to professionally grow our network and each other through sharing and paying it forward. So I wish I had more quickly realized the power of putting students first and giving them voice and choice in the classroom.
Oh man, that is so cool. And I love the way that you said, you described, I never really dawned on me that, being 11 years in the classroom, the way that you said, as far as dismissing by a bell, you've got students in rows and, so on. It was at least not in my classrooms for the most part, as I was talking with a guest on Saturday, where it's like, hey, my classroom, it was like everybody was standing up, everybody was creating, everybody was moving around. But for the most part, you do see a lot of that, traditional kind of setup where it's the guide or the sage on the stage, yes, instead of the guide on the side. And of course, there's room for all of that too as well. I mean, there's times where, as a teacher, you have to be in the front and explaining, but you also have to allow the students to practice that which you are teaching and actually see, are they understanding? Because that can also gauge me. And that's one thing that I learned. It took me a while to learn because, as you know, or maybe not know, but I tell everybody, I didn't come from a traditional, college of education. I was marketing. It was customer service. So I looked at it a little bit different, but still it took me a while to hone in that practice and learning from others, like you mentioned, a lot of other educators that were out there. And really, once you allow the students to, like you said, and amplify their voice, work, you as a teacher can really see, it's like, okay, did what I say come through correctly? Right. Were there any misconceptions? Maybe I need to go back and I need to review. So, those are something that's one thing that I liked. And I wish, for myself and going along with you, that somebody would have told me that a lot sooner when I first started. So definitely very interesting there. Now, you did mention that you did go back, face to face. Have you been back face to face for a while or doing hybrid for a while?
Yeah, so during March 1 year ago, we went full virtual with an adjusted schedule, minimal content, minimal student contact. Here in New York, we start school after Labor Day. So in September, we came back to our classroom with the hybrid model. So half of our students at home, half of them in the classroom, and we were required to teach synchronously, whether or not they're in front of us physically or virtually, all together. So this year has been pretty much that the whole year, a hybrid model of instruction, which unfortunately anchors the educator to a device or a space where students can see them and the students in the room can hear them. So I don't know that it's the best. I know it's a Band-Aid. I worry it's really not the most effective model for both audiences. There are very good ways to be a virtual teacher and very good ways to be a face-to-face teacher. I'm not sure that mixing the two is super productive.
Oh, I see. And yeah, that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because that's the model that we're seeing pretty much in a lot of the school districts, at least here that I've seen. I'm pretty sure that all around the nation and even across the world, seeing that model. But like you mentioned earlier, I think that is something that's, being anchored, like you said. I know that in a traditional classroom setting, or at least when everybody's face to face, we always wanted the teachers to be able to move around. And of course, now it's become very difficult. Now, what are some of the challenges, or at least maybe, well, for you, like you mentioned, you feel you're anchored, but other than that, what are some of the other challenges that you may see, or responses or feedback that you're getting from your students, whether they're at the elementary level, or I'm sorry, at the both collegiate, because I know you mentioned you do collegiate as well, and of course, with your students as well within the schools district.
Yeah, I mean, there's a clear comfort that occurs when you're given the option to stay home and not get out of bed early, and the option to just kind of roll over and turn on the webcam and be in class. That option, even though it's against our nature for many of us as learners, is taken by a lot. My university class this fall was hybrid, half and half until the end of the semester. The very last class was one student and myself in the room with 20 people at home online because of choice. This current semester, again, at a different university, I gave my students a choice and said, look, if half of you are here, I'll be here. If it's less than half, then we'll go back to virtual. Still hybrid, and I keep getting thank yous from students who are in both situations. If they have an autoimmune issue, that getting in the classroom right now face-to-face is not serving their needs. So again, while it's not the most effective model, it's kind of what we're stuck with in many cases right now until we revisit this at an institutional level.
Now, what are the talks right now currently as far as possibly what this following school year will look like, for you?
Well, the classroom, my K-12 classroom, middle school, we're talking potentially of going to a 4-to-1 model where 4 of them will be face-to-face and we'll have 1 virtual class. That, like many schools right now, it's hard to be overly critical. Honestly, it seems to be shifting by the day. But right now, that's what I'm hearing. For the university, I'm hearing a push for face-to-face. Universities, part of the way they make money is on-campus housing. It's almost like its own little city. So when they have these universities that have students virtual, it's an entirely different business model. So they're incentivized in a different way than public education to get students back in the room.
Excellent. Well, Micah, thank you so much for sharing your experience right now currently, because I know that for a lot of teachers that are out there either watching or listening, sometimes they may think like, am I the only one doing this? But to be able to hear this experience from other educators such as yourself, both at the collegiate level and at a school district level, I mean, at least they could feel like, I'm not alone here. And at least being able to hear what other models are out there, or what other things could be happening. So thank you so much for sharing that. So Now let's move on a little bit. Now that I'd love to hear a little bit more about your projects. As I mentioned earlier, or we're going to talk about Ready Learner One, and I must say that just to give a backstory to all our audience members, the first or one of the first times that I actually connected with Micah, or at least knew who Micah was because of my passion and love for augmented reality, and of course in follow on Twitter, following, hashtag ARVR or ARVR and EDU. I mean, you can find so many people there that are doing some amazing things. And that's how I also learned about Micah and started following him and doing the work that following the work that he does along with that. And then, of course, all of a sudden, I see like Ready Learner One. I'm like, wow, what's this? So, Micah, tell us a little bit about Ready Learner One and where that came from.
Yeah. How much time do we have? I'm just going to keep going. So Ready Learner One, the story has to do with three people. So Christine Lyon Bailey, Jesse Lubinsky, and myself. So the three of us working somewhat independently in similar circles on exciting ed tech projects. For me, I had been working with augmented reality for my Google Innovator project. I've been working with geolocation-based augmented reality. So think geocaching, but with augmented reality. And so experimenting with how do I do this with kids? We in my classroom, we plotted a cemetery down the road from our school, and we uploaded it into AR spatial software so you could look through your phone at headstones and click on them. And it was based on being there physically. So it's a form of augmented reality that gets me the most excited. It's getting up and going, which became popular with Pokemon Go after my work. Of course, I like to think I inspired Pokemon Go, but that's not true. I had done some writing here and there about my work, and Steve Bambury in the Middle East reached out to me about a blog post and said, would you write one? So I drafted something, and he said, the title of this needs some work. How about Ready Learner One? I said, Steve, that's great. And from thenceforth, Steve, as he says, bequeathed to me Ready Learner One, and started to take it to the next level by seeking out people like you that are in the AR and VR space and asking them for stories. Jesse Lubinsky and I spoke, and Jesse was like, this is great. I said, look, I'm so busy. I had just finished my first book, Wanderlust EDU, and I was swamped. So I said, Jesse, let's work on this together. I know it would be better, and it probably wouldn't happen if I did this by myself. So Jesse, of course, he is the Energizer Bunny, man. He just took off, and things started to accelerate, but there was a missing component. And one of the people we had talked to very early in some planning was Christine Lyon Bailey. And Christine said, well, I'm working on a book. And we're like, well, we're working on a book. So we worked on a book. The book originally was called Ready Learner One, but then as we started to build out the book, we started to speak with industry professionals. Christine's particularly had some connections with some companies that were manufacturing products, but they weren't educators. So there was a clear gap. I like to think of it as a translator, someone who like the Lorax speaks for the trees, who is speaking for the educators. And so Christine and Jesse and I decided, this is a gap, and we want to address this gap. Particularly in augmented and virtual realities where we started. So we formed the company Ready Learner One, and we shifted the name of our book to Reality Bites. And so Reality Bites is a compilation, there it is, of amazing educators telling stories about using AR and VR in the classroom. We wanted the stories to be first, not how-tos, because this technology changes so incredibly rapidly. While the hardware becomes more and more accessible, the software shifts and changes. So it's like if you've ever done worked with Google products, and you open it up and you're like, wait a second, where did that button go? Or this shiny new button is new, maybe I should click that. Well, that happens in AR and VR quite a bit. So again, we put stories first in Reality Bites, and we built a framework for helping people have a common vocabulary around augmented and virtual reality experiences. And we call that our XR ABC framework.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I really, and all our audience members, anybody watching, if you do have an opportunity to, please make sure that you do get this book, Reality Bites. It is a great, great story, actually book, because what Michael was talking about is the stories that you hear about educators. Now, for somebody that may be new to augmented reality, or maybe just be just a little hesitant, a book like this would be wonderful, because you get to hear genuine stories from educators that are out there that are using this technology, and you get to read about them. But not only that, what I loved about this, like Michael was mentioning, is that at the end of every chapter, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this here, they have the XR ABC toolkit. And for example, here at the end of that little chapter section of reading, they give you a little scan code there that you can get. And it's amazing. I mean, you've got the ISTE standards, you've got the 5Es, you've got the 4Cs, you've got the ISTE standards for students, SAMR model right here, all of that information for anybody, any teacher that is just interested in or wanting to dive in. This is a great book. Like I said, great stories, and they offer so many great resources. And not only that, but it really is a lot of fun. And what I mean by that is you can actually, scan the codes here, and you'll actually see Micah, you'll see Jesse, and you see Christine pop up here, and they'll actually be talking to you and greeting you. And it's a great interactive book where you can read it, you interact with it, you learn it, and then you can put it into practice. So, I mean, I really, really appreciate this book a lot, Micah, and the work that you and Jesse and Christine have done. It's been amazing. So what has been how about for yourself, and maybe a comment or two, maybe people that have reached out to you after reading this book, what have you heard, as far as feedback from the book?
Yeah, people have been excited about the approachability of the book. There's a lot of geeks out there who were innovators, and if you know the bell curve of adoption of innovation, innovators are a little bit out there. We're the gamers who try things out, and we take the leap and then ask, should we have jumped? Not everybody has that mindset. Some want to see practice first and see success first, and that's much more common. So what we wanted to do in this book is to make it approachable, but also allow people to stretch their practice a bit by seeing exemplars of people using Google Translate, a form of augmented reality, to better meet the needs of their learners, or to take their students in a virtual lab using something like Labster and blowing up chemicals in a safe space. I mean, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like one of the things that you mentioned, a lot of times you get to see and experience, or the students get to see and experience a lot of these great things that maybe they may not have an opportunity to do. And the technology is advancing so much where, now schools, if they don't have to actually dissect a frog, right, they can, simply view it in, virtual reality, and you get that same effect. And again, you don't have to spend on the frog, and of course you don't have to get the formaldehyde smell and all that stuff and all that ickiness, but you can just see it and experience the same thing in just a nicer, neater, cleaner package and content. So those are some of the things that are great. So now you mentioned something about the adoption curve, and it's so funny that I did have this bookmarked here on this other book.
Hey, there's that book.
Yeah. So, and then of course I see this, and I actually had that bookmarked, and I was like, wow, he just mentioned that. So it's a great way. So talk to us a little bit about Wanderlust EDU, Micah.
Well, first of all, you have a vintage copy there. There is a new book cover. If anybody hops on Amazon, you'll see it. I have a nice poster in my classroom of that cover. I think it makes a fantastic poster. The book Wanderlust EDU is a book about your why. So I talk about innovation, I talk about change, I form it as an adventure, but it's a reminder of our why. It's a reminder of the common relationship that technology and education has had for hundreds of years. This is not new. And I try to prepare ourselves for talking about technology with colleagues, with students, with parents, with admins, and framing it in a way that's relatable. For example, I talk about the pencil being a form of technology. So think of the first teacher when they were going to use this pencil in the classroom. It took Chicago City Schools 100 years to decide we're going to use a pencil in our classroom. Now, that's just because we know about Chicago. I'm sure the rest of the country was the same, but that's what the data is. So when teachers use this, they said, how am I going to keep it sharp? What are the students going to do with it when I give it to them? How am I going to monitor their progress? How am I going to assess their needs? The same thing we've done with tablets and Chromebooks. How am I going to keep it powered? What are they going to write when I give them this device? How am I going to keep track of it? How am I going to use behavior management? And so all these problems are relatable to our teaching ancestors. It's been happening for years. And so I talk about that, but also ways of helping yourself with professional growth, some strategies, including the SAMR model, some TPAC, and then understanding where are we going in the future? What's our future of work? What's our how do we think about preparing students for their future rather than perpetuating our past? And I think that's hard to take a step back, but that's where the adoption curve comes in.
Yeah. Now, as far as future of work and getting there, where do you see the future of work headed right now, at least through your eyes? And of course, as a researcher, also as well, and being on top of, the ed tech game, what is it that you're seeing right now as far as the direction?
Well, really quite fascinating. I'm glad you asked that question because I've been practicing it quite a bit. Before the pandemic, a lot of conversation about the future of work being, I think they said 40% gig-based by 2021, but that statistic was done in 2018, and it was based on where we thought the future was going. So here we are, trial by fire. Now we've done asynchronous, synchronous, virtual, hybrid. We've done it all. So when the dust settles, what are we going to do? We're seeing some positive stuff, people being highly productive at home, but not knowing when to turn the switch off. That's dangerous, right? For mental health. We've seen people lose a sense of connection, and which fosters creativity. Depending on how you operate, if you are a coder, you might prefer to be alone. Not to stereotype coders, but I've heard that from coders saying I would prefer to be alone. And I've heard creatives say, if I had the choice, I'd be back in the office because I need to be around people. It's an introvert extrovert kind of thing about how we work best. So it's interesting. I've heard about REI, a big outdoor equipment company, starting a huge facility in Seattle before the pandemic, building a brand new facility, and then selling it off because they realized we can be productive in a different way. We don't need this new brick and mortar structure. So for the future of work, our students are learning about themselves in an accelerated rate. They're learning about how they work best. They're learning about time management in, again, unfortunately, a trial by fire type way. And I think for teachers, we're learning about a few things. I guess I'm shifting gears a little bit, but one of the things I'm worried about in education is we have tasted automation. We've tasted using tools that grade for us quickly and things that we can put in front of students that gives instant feedback. And not that those are bad. I think some of them are fantastic. However, we have to take steps back when the dust settles and look at this as what's best for our learners. Sometimes automation, although feedback is instant, it's not always the most personal narrative, which will lead to learner growth. And all of that is synced to the future of work, where our learners are going to be in a place where automation is going to make some of their jobs faster, but the humanness, the creativity, the dialogue, we have to grow that skill set, the empathy.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, we've been having some, or at least I've been listening to similar conversations as well, and even questions from, just people in higher ed and in some of the courses that I've taken, and asking about the future of, artificial intelligence in the classroom. And, to me, it always comes back to that personal touch that, you can get that feedback immediately, but how are you building a relationship?
Right.
That takes, it's that person, that contact, that collaboration, the speaking, and like you said, just that human aspect of being able to just share and tell stories, and things of that sort. And then that, would be something terrible to miss, but, we'll see where that goes. But so now let's talk a little bit about, professional development. As we're talking a little bit here, we were talking a little bit also about Changemaker. Tell us about that, a little bit more.
Yeah, so like I said, at our Heart Ready Learner 1, we started in the augmented and virtual reality space. Very excited about it. Before the pandemic, we had some some great leads and some projects all queued up. And the pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of companies. So we pivoted our business model to focus on serving educators and the corporate training space. We have 2 branches, corporate and K-12, of course, and higher ed. But in the education space, we wanted to meet educators where they were and provide them with what they needed. So we partnered with a long-standing organization called the Madison Institute, TMI Education, Dr. Brian Chinney in New Jersey. And Dr. Chinney had started a consortium model where he was providing schools access in the New Jersey area to really high-end professional development opportunities where schools could chip in together to be able to access it instead of trying to pay for the edu-famous people or most highly qualified individuals out of pocket. So that pooling of resources model is what we have amplified by joining forces under what we call the Changemaker model. So changemakeredu.org is the website that shows our offerings. We launched a conference in July of last year, the Changemaker Conference, and we had 2,000 registrants from 33 different countries. We view that as a success, especially for a short turnaround and using that to launch this brand of Changemaker. Since then, we've developed a platform where educators can have access to highly qualified and vetted professional development anytime, anywhere. So they can download the app from the iOS or Google Play App Store, or they can visit the website dashboard and take these courses with, again, some of the best trainers on the planet and get their professional growth. It's an impressive platform. It's an impressive offering. We're very proud of it, and it just continues to grow. We've got educators on there daily, taking courses, growing, earning certificates of attendance, and a lot of really positive feedback, and so much more momentum. It just keeps going.
Oh, that is great. And right now, I mean, it's as far as professional development, the ability now that I think, and if we can talk a little bit about that, because one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, as yourself, being just a very innovative person, very active in the education landscape and pretty much in the ed tech world too as well. My question to you is, what do you do for yourself too as well to stay on top of everything, to stay on top of your game per se?
Yeah, and that's been a challenge because there's a wide net. You think ed tech and you think education and professional development, and education and professional development is not only ed tech. We're talking about SEL, mental health. We're talking about the legal side. There's so much that we all need growth in as educators. So it's really about tapping into experts. Our Ready Learner One team is a powerhouse. We've got an amazing team of educators that are constantly growing with each other and informing each other, and leaning on other people has been really important. And understanding, for Micah, what are my skills? What's my expertise? So instead of trying to be the jack of all trades, what am I trying to master? And so what am I trying to offer the community? And so, augmented virtual reality have been important to me. But also I've also spent time in trying to help educators understand themselves as change agents, and that mastering a tool or a content is no longer a skill. The skill is mastering change. And so how do we master change? And so I've done some writing about that, as well as my journey in the classroom to try to help people embrace a practice or a pedagogy of iteration and what I call innovativeness.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about that because that's something that really resonates with me. And especially, like I said, coming from a different background, from a business side into education. And for myself, it was, I think the best advice I got was when I was teaching in Arizona. There was a former Marine, and one day we were having a talk, and he just said the phrase, it was improvise, adapt, and overcome. And that, for the last, I want to say 8 years has been my phrase when I've been in the world of education. As things change, as things come down, whether it's from central office, the state level, from the national level. And like you said, change happens. As teachers, we need to know how to improvise, adapt, and overcome to those changes, because oftentimes we can be very, very comfortable with our practice. I mean, especially if we've done it for so many years. And like you said, they've mastered that class because they already have all the notes. They know what works for them. And it's pretty much, they're teaching the same class for 20 years, or the same way for 20 years. So what are some ways, maybe if you don't mind sharing some of your best advice to teachers, and especially now where they've definitely had to have a little bit of that improvising, adapting, and overcoming?
Yeah, I mean, I love the way you talk about that. I've mastered cleaning the head on a VCR with an alcohol swab, but it turns out that doesn't matter anymore. Used to make mixtapes. Well, I don't make mixtapes, but I can craft a music list. I did that with CDs for a while. Then I can craft that music list in collaboration with Spotify. So some of those skills are relatable. Some of them we just have to throw away. Early in my career, I would invest in robust activities that I believed I could reuse every single year. That's out the window now. Now it's like, okay, what can I use right now? If I can't use it next year, I'm not worried about that. I want to use what's the best right now for my students. The sustainable activity is not important. I'm not talking about sustainability, but the activity itself, whether or not it's available next year, if this website's going to go down, it doesn't matter. It's about the here and now, and it's about working with the best that we have right in front of us, with an understanding that the years that come, it's going to require more change from us. I think one advantage that I've had myself as an educator is I had career and goal and personal plans that are not in alignment with being in the industry for 21 years. So I literally, I kid you not, I write about a little bit in Wanderlust. I would treat each year like it was my last. Like this is it. So all right, let's go in and, other than thinking I could reuse something in a different context, I really just try to think about this could be my last year. And what I saw was that benefited me not as much with my classroom activities. It benefited me in my relationships. So with my students, it was more focused on right now, right here, who we are as people, and giving voice and choice to them in the moment as much as possible.
Oh, and I think that's wonderful. And I know Pili right here, she did mention, it says, I do repeat activities, but always with a new twist. I mean, there's always different iterations. And of course, you change, you pivot. And that one thing that you mention a lot, and I've heard that word come out, during this conversation several times, is that it's okay to pivot. It's okay to change. Oftentimes you may be going in a certain direction, and you have to kind of change things as you would with any lesson. Sometimes you've got the wonderful lesson planned. You've got it set up the night before you go in, and then something happens and it's kind of like, so you'll have to learn how to pivot. So being able to be in the there and now, and sometimes, it's okay to be vulnerable. And I think, for a lot of teachers, they're just very scared to kind of look like, oh my goodness, like I didn't know how to do that. It happens. We're only human, but it's just one of those things that it's very important. I think, like you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head on a lot of those points. And I remember too making mixtapes and being a master at that too as well.
But you raise a really good point, and we do have this feeling as educators that we have to be the master of the classroom, meaning it needs to be polished and clean, a perfect performance every time. But what I've been thinking about this as a dad, I have 3 kids. And my 3 children, when I, get mad at the dishwasher or something, they don't see the best of me, unfortunately. But I think about that as an educator. If I fail in front of my students, and I think it's okay to fail in front of my students, I'm teaching them rigor. I'm teaching them agency. I'm teaching them, yep, this didn't work. Let's figure something out together, instead of put your heads down while I figure this out. I mean, failure is going to happen. We have to accept that, and that shouldn't prohibit us from trying new things. We just have to be prepared with the understanding that it could directly lead to real growth in our students as people more than in the content area. And so I try to relate that to my children here at home, and I calm down when the dishwasher doesn't function. I'm getting better.
There you go. And so I have Dr. Maria Elena Corbet who's joining us. It says here, when learners are giving voice and choice, it's always a different activity. I'm always in awe of how our learners make the projects their own and what they create. So
That
yeah,
that's so good. And I saw that Pile had a similar comment about reusing. Don't get me wrong. I teach one thing 5 times a day. That's my current prep for American history, social studies. And I have activities and styles of activities that I reuse because the learners in front of me are different every time and it changes every time. So the point I was raising about not reusing is was more related to whether or not this tool will be available in the future.
yeah. And that's very true because sometimes those tools either the district won't buy them again for the following year or
Yeah.
they just won't be around. And so those are some of the things that, in other words, just not be dependent on that. But I wanted to touch a little bit more like what you're saying as far as failure. And I had a discussion about this about a week ago. It was a group of us and we are talking about failure and what that looks like or what it can do, and other people, the consensus was, it's failure is always going to be there, but we're trying to see if there's a different way of reframing that because of course you hear failure, it's such a negative connotation. And then of course you hear, first attempt in learning, you hear sale and second attempt in learning and, things of that sort and just kind of trying to reframe those things. But, like I said, one of the things that I was talking to you about earlier prior, to the show was me ringing the fail bell and and for those of you that may not be familiar with that is, you're going through your Google Innovator project. When you hit that pivot point, in other words, okay, you're going in one direction, but now it's like, yikes, you have to pivot. It's kind of like now my project is changing. So they call it the fail bell, but I was sharing this with them as well. I said, it was very interesting that when you have a group of educators and friends that understand what it is that you're going through, as many of us through the Innovator Academy, and they hear that you rang the fail bell, I was like, I had so many people cheering me on and they were just like, wow, this is great. And you don't hear that. Sometimes it's like, oh man, I failed the test. It's like, ooh, you failed the test, or, it's just got that negative connotation. But here you make a pivot and people celebrate it. And, it's part of even us as educators, it's okay to pivot. It's going to be there.
Yeah, I love the example. It's a biblical example of refining as gold, refining as pure as gold, and how if we really want to be the best we can be, we have to be tested, we have to be tried, we have to go through a fire that brings our impurities to the top. Learning rigor, learning stick-to-itiveness, learning agency. We're not born with those as much as we'd like to think we are. Those are things that we learn through failure. And, some of the best teachers I've worked with have failed. Teachers that have struggled in life at many different things. But some teachers were excellent students, and so they became teachers. And that's great when they're modeling good practice. But it's also important to know and understand failure. I think it helps us relate to our students in a whole new level.
Yeah, most definitely. And then we have Dr. Rene Corbet. So I guess you notice I have both Dr. Maria Elena, wife, and of course Dr. Rene Corbet also here joining us. Thank you so much for joining us today. And so he says here, we can learn as much and possibly more from failure as you can from getting it right the first time. And then he says here, if everything in education is high stakes, students will never take chances and get out of their comfort zones. So
yeah, I'll start. I will frankly tell my students there's a good chance this lesson's going to fail, but we're going to try it anyhow. I'll say, you probably can't get this right the first time. Let's give it a shot. Just set them up. It's safe. It's a safe place to try it out. When I grade student work, when I grade their projects, if you will, I grade process. The end product, it's great. I like the end product. I want it complete. But process is what we grade because the process is where the powerful learning takes place.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I mention a lot is, going through grade school and everything becoming standardized and just sitting there. And everything to me growing up was it's either A through E or F, H, J, K, whatever the answer choices were. And I do mention this, that when I finally went for, followed my master's degree and went into the program, there was never a semester exam. There was never a test. It was, here is a problem, or find a problem related to your field and find a solution to it. And of course, the professors walk you through the steps. Of course, they give you a rubric, but in the end, you're turning in a project. But along the way, they're looking at that process. So my final project was really a portfolio of all the projects that I had submitted. But don't get me wrong, to me, this was like, what do you mean when they said, you mean I can choose what I want to do? And yeah, you can. Wait a minute, like, are you sure? And I was stuck because that's the route. That's how I learned. But then after that, it was like, oh wow. So that same practice, it's something that is magical in the classroom when you can see the process and you see the multiple modalities of learning styles that you have our students or the way they learn, the way they solve things. And so again, this last Saturday, our guest Amanda Macia said, she saw a quote and says, our students aren't standardized, but yet we give standardized tests.
Right.
So, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that when I was younger, I had a more romantic view where I would say, pick what you want and write about however you want, or pick a medium you like. And a lot of students struggled with the complete absence of structure. So it does depend on our learner, the age of our learner, the context of our learner, the content they're learning, the skill set they have. We just have to know them. It's about relationships and knowing what they can handle, and setting them up for success is really what we want to do. Not setting up for gotcha moments where we can prove they were wrong.
Excellent. Awesome, Micah. So let me know just right now, what are you curious about right now? What is going on through the mind of Micah as far as maybe next projects, or maybe some research that you're doing, things that you're saying, hey, maybe I can do something here in this area. What's the future for Micah right now?
Well, I'm all over the place, but the one that's kind of clean and down the middle, a recent publication I wrote was on a globalized curriculum. So how do we as human beings, rather than Americans, Canadians, and Mexicans, how do we as human beings start to speak about education? And how do we prepare our students for their future globally as global citizens in an increasingly smaller world? In the paper, I actually argue that a STEM-focused might not be the future. While I value STEM, that's a very capitalistic, economically driven model for making nations stronger economically, which, that's fine. But preparing our students for the future, I think the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs from the United Nations, are really going to be helpful in guiding that practice. Thinking more of humanities as the glue, the storytelling that syncs up these conversations from the sciences and math fields. And that's what I'm excited about, is this global curriculum and guiding our conversations at a global level around student growth and making the planet better for them on this Earth Day. It's like you set me up for an Earth Day quote.
There you go. That is awesome. And so what I'm going to do too, Micah, because you did share this with me, and I think that this is just phenomenal. I'm going to pop in a link here into our chat. And then, of course, tell us a little bit about this video. I am going to cue it up. Just that we won't watch the whole thing, but
sure.
Let me go ahead and cue this up, and you can kind of talk us a little bit about as far as what's going on here now that you mentioned Earth Day.
Well, there's me walking to school. There's me talking. No, so I worked with Google Earth, the Google Earth team. I invited them into my classroom. This is my room. These are my students. We worked on some storytelling about our community, about pollution, about industrial waste in our community, and how we have worked as a community to resolve some of that and try to paint a picture of what was and what is. A story of hope that, as you'll hear from my learners, I love hearing them talk. They talk about maybe somebody else. It's the cutest thing. A kid's like, maybe somebody else in a different part of the world has a polluted lake like we did. And maybe they'll see that they can fix their lake like we did. And it's the best. It's a genuine narrative. The kids get me so excited. And this was a real privilege to be part of and to amplify their voices at a global level. And so I don't know, this is real, as silly as it looks, and as the kids look like it's staged and they're nodding. It's a genuine experience, and I hope you get a chance to check it out.
Yes, guys, please make sure you do check it out. It is a great video. And Micah, thank you so much. I mean, I can see, the kids just being engaged in your classroom, and definitely the passion that you have when you gave that big old high five. And I know for sure like that's definitely not staged, because this is definitely the type of person that you really are as like I always say, I look up to you also as an education leader, but as a mentor and as a friend as well, because I get to learn so much from you. In our PLF, being part of my personal learning family is something that's great. And so thank you so much, Micah, for everything that you shared here today. And of course, if you haven't, make sure that you check this out. Of course, there's a new cover, but I got the old cover, but it's also signed.
All right.
But anyway, so make sure you pick up Wanderlust, guys. And also, please don't forget about Reality Bites as well. And there's also the esports playbook as well, that one right there. So make sure you check that out. Make sure you visit Micah at Ready Learner One. Check out their site, follow him on Twitter, and again, reach out to him. And thank you so much, Micah, for being here. Our audience members, please don't forget also, if you can, just go by and visit our site. You can check out all the rest of the episodes that we have. Today is episode 59. We're getting so close to 100 episodes. A year ago, April 10th, was our very first episode with Dr. Corbet, who was actually asking one of the questions here today.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. But we'd appreciate you guys if you come by and you check out and maybe rate our show. Also, leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you just want to drop us a line, you can give us or contact us. Let us know how we're doing. I'm always wanting to grow. I want to know you. I want to know all my audience members. What can we do? What can we continue doing? And just always working to stay on top of things and bring you the best, as we always try and do every week on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And also, please don't forget to check out our merch, as maybe, get your future conference wear. You want some comfortable shirts, you can come and check them out here, so that way you can wear them at the future conferences that you'll be presenting at, whether it's live or even virtual. Hey, pick yourself up a shirt. We definitely appreciate your support. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for making my EdTech life what it is. And, it's always an honor to be here sharing my passion, but most importantly, sharing our guests' passions, so you get to know them. You get to know where they're coming from, that they are real, genuine, hardworking people just like yourself, that are just, doing some great things for the community. And hopefully also by you listening to our shows, it'll spark that or continue fanning that flame, I should say, in education, to continue doing what you're doing. So Mike, again, thank you so much, sir, for being here. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you, buddy. Thanks.
All right, guys. And until next time, my friends, don't forget, stay techie.